Well, hello, everyone. I'm Carmi Garzione. I'm Carmi Garzione, Dean of the College of Science, and thank you for joining us once again for the second lecture in our series for the College of Science lecture series. And so before we begin, I just want you to join in giving a round of applause to our musician, Alec Andre. Thank you. And so it's so great to see so many of you tonight as we continue the 2025 College of Lecture series. We love bringing together educators, researchers across campus at the University of Arizona. And here the lecture series has flourished for now 20 years with tens of thousands of attendees over those years. And we're deeply grateful for your support as you join us here tonight to enjoy another lecture. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Galileo Circle members in the audience tonight. The Galileo Circle is a community of individuals whose support is vital for the continued excellence of the College of Science. Thank you for your continued support and for joining us here as we celebrate our faculty, staff, and students. I would also like to thank our corporate sponsors and media partners for the lecture series, and in particular, our presenting sponsors, Holualoa Company, the Marshall Foundation, Raytheon, and Research Corporation for Science Advancement. Our series sponsors, O'Reilly Chevrolet, Tech Launch Arizona, TMC Health, Tucson Electric Power, and Visit Tucson, and our media partners, Biz Tucson Magazine and Cox Communications. I would also like to thank Arizona Arts Live for their continued partnership and helping us bring the lecture series alive in Centennial Hall every year. There are many ways that people share their thoughts, ideas, feelings, and discoveries with one another. And in the spirit of reaching audiences through a diverse platform for communication, I'm pleased to share that the College of Science is collaborating with the University of Arizona Poetry Center once again for this year's lecture series. Before each lecture, a poet will read an original poem crafted just for the lecture that evening. Tonight's poet is Joni Wallace. Joni's first poetry collection, Landscape with Missing River, was the winner of the 2023 Arizona-New Mexico Book Award and the 2024 Women Writing the West Literary Award. Please join me in welcoming Joni to the podium.
Hello, everyone. This poem addresses the language of the internal versus the language of the external, I think. It's called Moving Day. Late afternoon, and my son says his bones sing a leg ache. Mine, whale fall. An inside grotto where Jonah stands up, beholds the deafening gong, his own bones fluorescing bling. For 3 nights, the moon beamed phosphorescent waves through curtains, eddies and riptides, projector-lit shadows, meat shapes, 200-ton cetaceans cast on the wall, and sirens of stars and more stars, enough to sound a riot. I have never loved anyone so much or ever will. Hangers, a coat, the twister we stopped to video, cloud columns enormous above a mesa. Have you ever seen bowheads asleep? Flotilla lungs, the slow motion film of a rabbit falling. Have you ever seen the dog's radiographed ribcage, vertebrae? I keep on my phone because the heart boxed between a fistful of snow startled me. Beastly, this heat, this long drive, leaving place, the monster contours below where breath Can you imagine it? A self inside, watery, salty vellum, gray opal endless, the two of us now in the prairie's wide open, cornfield after cornfield, a speckling of cows, slant sun, crows, your white, white teeth. OMFG, you say, which means to be swallowed, holy. Thank you.
I just want to thank Joni again for that beautiful poem and for helping to warm our audience up to tonight's talk. So I'd like to introduce tonight's featured speaker, Dr. Genesis Arizmendi. Dr. Arizmendi is an assistant professor at the University of Arizona with appointments in speech, language, and hearing sciences and cognitive science. A proud alumna of the University of Arizona, Dr. Arizmendi's research explores how policy and social context influence bilingual development and educational outcomes. She uses implementation science framework to examine cognition, language, and academic achievement in bilingual children with diverse learning profiles, from typical development to developmental language disorders to difficulties with mathematics and reading. Dr. Arizmendi serves as the director of the Bilingualism and the Brain Education and Language Lab, where her research aims to mitigate disparities within educational and healthcare systems, focusing on Spanish English-speaking communities. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Arizmendi to the stage.
Okay, Buenas noches, Centennial Hall. It's so good to be here with y'all. Thank you for being here and braving through the weather. Thank you to the College of Science for hosting this wonderful series on the science of communication. So let's start with a show of hands. How many of you started learning a language that was not English in your home? Okay, quite a few people. And then how many of you started learning a second language, maybe in high school, in college, as your second language elective, or Duolingo, or language classes? A lot of folks. That's amazing and so great to see. One of the big questions that I often get from people who have started learning later in life is, why is it harder? Why can't I pick it up the same way I see my child pick it up? And one of those reasons is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to change and adapt to new environments and situations. And the primary time for most rapid growth of the brain is from the ages of 0 and 5. And that makes a lot of sense, right? We're new to the world. We're learning all of the things that make us human, from talking with our parents and the way they communicate with us, from learning to understand different sounds in our environments, but also how to walk, how to talk. And this is also, when we're zooming into the brain is made up of neurons. Neurons we can think about as our internal communicators, and these are all of the different areas shown here of the neuron and how the neuron communicates with other parts of the brain. The neuron forms neural networks, and this is some of the latest research that's been published by researchers Shaps and Co. et al. And these neural networks form a complex network of cells, and they act as a body's communication team. So everything that I'm doing has to send these signals down to my mouth to communicate all of these different things, and I'm going to be breaking that down for you tonight. All right, so along with neuroplasticity, there are a variety of different functions our brain performs across our lifespan, and that includes neurogenesis, so the formation of new cells in the brain, but also new synapses. And these are formed based on new experiences and opportunities to learn, creating new neural connections. We also see a strengthening of synapses, and that's because of repetition and repeated exposure, opportunities to learn. And we also see weakening of the synapses. And this can really tie back into what language is. So we'll be coming back to some of these concepts later on in the presentation, but this is a preview. And the brain is formed by a variety of different experiences that include genetics, include nutrition and culture, environment, health, how much one is sleeping. It also includes stressors and traumas that one experiences throughout their lives. And the experiences that one has, whether in the physical domain, sensory domain, social domains, like communicating with other people, and potentially early education if we think about preschool opportunities, Head Start opportunities, and language. But we can't break apart language from a lot of these other experiences that include early education, culture, and some of these are all deeply connected to each other. So let's take a look at human brain development. So this slide shows you all of these different features, including language, these sensory pathways, and higher order cognitive functions. And what we can see here when we look at language and sensory pathways, this is beginning early on. This happens before a child is even born. So what is going on? One of the big things that has emerged in research is that babies in utero can pick up on the sounds and the patterns that their mother speaks. So there's a sensitivity to the language already in the womb on how to pick up on the features of the language of the mother. And we also see these hearing pathways. This emerges based on what the child is experiencing, but also as they are born, they're starting to attune their ear to the sounds that they are most frequently hearing in their environment. And those sounds they're hearing are likely language. So as we look at language, you see that the greatest period of learning happens between 0 and 5. And this follows a developmental pattern that's expected. Between 0 and 1 years of age, that's when children or infants are starting to learn the sounds that are regular for their patterns of the language that they're using, the words, the routines in which language is used, games that mothers and caregivers may be playing with with their child. And this continues on. Of course, it doesn't mean it ends, but the most rapid growth of the brain occurs at this point. As you saw, over 90% of the brain develops by the time a child is 5 years old. So if we think about language, we can see here, living in beautiful southern Arizona, what are some of the common languages that you hear around in your day-to-day environment? Oftentimes, people say, well, Spanish, of course, and indeed, Spanish has been in this region longer than English has. So let's take a closer look at the data that was reported in the census data by the Latino Data Hub. So in our community in Pima County, there are 57% of Latinos that are speaking Spanish in the home. There are also 8% of the Native American community and 2% of the white community. But there are other languages that are also spoken in our community. So we also see Asian and Pacific Islanders, 65% of them, of the community, is speaking a different language at home that is not English. We are also seeing 15% of the Black community and 22% of the Native American community speaking another language that is not English. When we look at which languages are the most common, we have Chinese, Navajo, German, and Arabic as the other dominant languages in Pima County. And that makes a lot of sense when we're looking around us, right? And listening and attuning to all of the different inputs that we hear in our day-to-day experiences being out in the community. But we also have to consider where we are geographically, and that is right down here, right in the borderlands, the US-Mexico borderlands. And this context is very unique, and it is not one that I thought was quite unique growing up. So I grew up in Nogales, Arizona, in Santa Cruz County, where 92.5% of my community spoke Spanish at home. And in my elementary school, I would go and I'd speak English. Everything was in English only, even though all of us were Spanish-speaking, or the majority of us were Spanish-speaking at home. Then, when we'd go out and check out some of the stores in downtown Nogales, here you can see Mexico, this hill right here and that right there being the wall. Of course there were going to be a lot of influences and hearing a lot of Spanish speakers in this area where a lot of shopping happened. Here, when I'd go and visit my nana and my tata, which was every single afternoon, I would speak Spanish. They were Spanish speakers. To this day, they are still Spanish speakers. And having to learn what it's like to grow up in a home, being raised intergenerationally, and seeing the needs of community are going to inform quite a bit of what I talk about later on. When we'd go to Walmart, it was either English, it was Spanish. It kind of depended on who we were going to see at the cashier. So, we had to be ready to communicate in either language. And so me following Nana around, tell the man this, okay, él dijo esto, right? So there was some preparation there in case English was the language that had to be used. And when we'd go to some place like Fast Trip, there was also the need to always be ready to communicate in one language or the other. So I'd go with Nana and she'd say, okay, dile 20 en la 6. So there I was walking into the Fast Trip and thinking, I don't know what this speaker is going to speak, so let me practice. 20 en la 5, 20 en la 5, 20 en la 5, or 20 on 5, right? It's rehearsing. So these contexts and this experience of having grown up in a place where everybody around me also had access to one language, also spoke both languages, despite the subtractive environment of being in an English-only school that wasn't reinforcing our second language, we were able to do that at home. So when I graduated from Nogales High School in 2007, I moved up to beautiful Tucson, Arizona. Proud triple Wildcat alum, and found myself here in this big new world that had more students on campus than there were in my hometown. So you can imagine what that experience was like, starting off new in a brand new city after growing up in a rural community, that is Nogales, Arizona. So this is something that I've learned over time and in communicating with many of my wonderful students this last year and a half, that this is not a unique experience that I have up here. I was a first-generation traditional university student, first-generation US-born American, rural community to city, and there was limited representation around me when I stepped foot on campus. I was an undeclared major. I didn't know what I wanted to study in college. So, when I received my U of A acceptance letter, I was like, congratulations, you'd been admitted as a undecided or undeclared major. And I remember getting that and my mom saying, pues, ¿qué vas a estudiar eso si no sabes qué vas a estudiar? How do you know what you're going to be studying if you don't even know what you're going to be doing up there? We figured it out. Right? So, and there was this part here that I would look around me on campus and I'd say, well, what's going on? It was such a culture shock. I didn't know how to find myself, and the only place I could was in my Spanish classes, in my heritage Spanish classes. And that's where I could hear Spanish and I could see other people that also looked like me. So in that early experience on this university campus, I was going through, so these are the different stages of the cultural adaptation process. So within that first year, I was experiencing a lot of this. I was a typical straight A student, National Honor Society, you know, did all the things in high school. And then I got here and I was starting to get B's. And, you know, I remember telling myself, man, I'd be lucky if I even get a bachelor's. So from there, I got so lucky to find the field of speech, language, and hearing sciences, where my passion and understanding and all of the things I'm interested in really came together to understand how the mind works, but it also made me want to learn more about how it is that bilingual communication works. And sure enough, I gradually recovered by being involved in this program and doing wonderful research in Dr. Mary Alt's laboratory, who was doing a lot of wonderful bilingual research at the time, and any opportunity that popped up for me, I was on it, right? I was eager and ready. And then ultimately, I was able to integrate into the community, and into speech, language, hearing sciences, and I ended up earning my bachelor's, master's, and PhD here from this wonderful institution. Yes. Thank you. And I eventually became a speech-language pathologist. And a question I always get when I say, this is what I do, I kind of get this look, well, so you work with kids who have difficulty with making their sounds? Oh, kids who have autism. Do you work with people who are deaf? Or, oh, you work with children who stutter. And yes and no. There are many misconceptions related to the field of speech-language pathology and what it is we actually do. So let's take a look at what speech, language, and communication is. So every time I have a thought, I have to tap into this. And with that, if I want to generate a thought, I say, okay, well, let's start firing all of these neurons, these connections, these neural networks to find the words that I want to communicate, to put them in order, to put them in a sentence that makes sense to you in real time. And then sometimes if it's in a conversation, you're going to respond right back to me in that moment. Language is form, content, and use. So form refers to phonology, which is the sounds of a language. Morphology refers to how words are combined. So think about, like, if I want to walk, I'm going to say walked. I walked. Putting that ed at the end means I already did it. Syntax is how you order things, how you order words in your sentences. I'll give you examples of each of these in a minute. And then content refers to semantics, and that is vocabulary, how we're understanding meaning in the language that we communicate in. Oftentimes, people see semantics and they think vocabulary. And use is pragmatics. So this refers to the social rules of communication, like turn-taking, eye contact, responding, how close you are to somebody. And those can vary widely from culture to culture and person to person. So let's go back to language, right? Every time I am communicating something, I have to find all of these sounds, combine them into words and sentences, and communicate those in real time. So if I want to say something like, this is fun, I have to find that meaning here and send it down to my articulators so that it displaces air here to reach your ear canal. So this is fun. All right? So we have this complex sequence of events that has to occur in the speech channel that involves the diaphragm, the lungs, the vocal folds, the trachea, and the larynx. So I have to coordinate my breath, release that airflow, constrict different muscles along my speech mechanism, and then move my tongue in just the right ways that you're going to understand what those words are. So here's an example.
Different parts of our nose and mouth are carefully positioned to create speech sounds. We position the velum, tongue, jaw, and lips in reference to permanent parts of our vocal tract, such as the roof of our mouth.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Isn't that amazing? So when we're looking at some of these channels, this whole complex process that has to occur in order for human-to-human communication to occur, we have the mental level that I was talking about, where I have to find those sound sequences, put them into words, put them into sentences, and then communicate them by sending those signals down to my motor neurons. Think about all of the innervation that is happening in your face with all of these sensitivities. Then from there, I have to send it to the physiological level to coordinate all of this from the diaphragm up to communicate a message. From there, airflow that is coming out through here displaces airflow, and it displaces the air and creates a vibration that reaches your ear. This vibration is in an acoustic domain. So we go from an acoustic level to an electrical signal in the ear canal that sends the electrical impulses to the brain for you to understand what it is we're talking about here. Isn't that bananas? I'm amazed by it every single day. But you can also imagine all of the different spaces in which challenges can occur, whether you are a child or whether you're an adult. So here's an example of speech production in an MRI, and I'm going to orient you before we get started, because every time I show this to some of my students or some students that I'm working with in the high schools, they're like, what is that thing? That is the tongue. So let's watch all of this complex sequence of...
There are times in life when words fall short. There are times in life when the lack of words become more powerful than the poem, Bible verse, or song. A loving hug is all you need. No words.
That's happening every single time we talk. Now, if we want to see more exaggerated movements, like when one is singing, let's take a look at that.
I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. And my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
Amazing! I watch those every single time and feel like this. It is incredible, and oftentimes in my line of work, it's not, I appreciate how we communicate, how we are able to do this in the first place, because the people that I'm working with have difficulties with doing, forming, communicating, getting out their sounds, getting out their words, getting out their needs, and connecting with others around them. So speech-language pathologists can work in a variety of different settings. I myself have worked in the educational system from K through, we were in 8th grade, K through 8. Then we were in an outpatient rehabilitation clinic. I did telehealth, I did home health, and private practice. So I've seen it all, and I've been able to see patients across Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And I continue to see the same issues manifest that I'll be talking about later today. We can also work with children, but we also work with adults. And we work with individuals across the lifespan. So some folks might be born with congenital disorders. That might be a child who has Down syndrome and might have difficulties communicating with me. That is something they were born with, right? But we also have developmental disabilities that might be due to difficulties in maturation, difficulties in the complex sequence of events that have to occur to send these messages down to formulate words, getting the correct sounds to be produced, right? There's a variety of different developmental disabilities, but there are also acquired disabilities where development was typical for a given period of time, and then something occurred that changed a person's ability to communicate with people around them. And that might be something like a traumatic brain injury that might impact organization of thoughts, ideas, inhibiting thoughts and not communicating them, but also can be something like a stroke. It can also be neurodegenerative disorders that also impact communication, like Parkinson. So lots of different areas in this field. In all of the areas, we need to learn how language can be impacted by a variety of different life events. But I wasn't just a speech-language pathologist. I became a bilingual speech-language pathologist. So what's the difference here? Well, bilingual communication requires two sets of form, content, and use, and understanding the differences between one language and the other, and recognizing when features are due to an underlying brain-based difficulty with learning language, or if it's, hey, I'm developing a second language, give me some time here. So with form, going back to some of these concepts, now I'll be able to give you some really fun examples. These are the sounds of a language. So here we have, I'm inspired by Dr. Bray's and Dr. McLean's presentation last week. Wonderful talk on dog-human communication. So in English, my second language, I have dog, D-O-G, right? D-A-G, dog. Okay, I have those sound sequences down. I can refer to this little guy as dog. But in my first language, I also have to know a different set of sounds to refer to the same thing, and that is perro. P-E-R-O. Perro. Right? But this is important when we're thinking about the variation between these two languages, and also the recognition that I have to learn that there is a difference in my first language, pero, versus perro. Because perro can be but. Quiero ir, pero no puedo. I want to go, but I can't go, right? With the r that exists in Spanish, that difference in this production of the sound has a different meaning. So the application of pero or perro are going to open up or activate different things for the listener that is listening to either this version or that version. We also have morphology. So this refers to the smallest unit of meaning in a language. And that is like these features that we add to the noun or any words, right, that change meaning. So when I put an S in English, I know that I turn it into a plural information, right? You see the S there, you're going to expect to see more than one. Luckily for me, my other language also uses an S at the end of a noun to indicate more than one. So I can apply that same rule and say dogs, perros, and it means the same thing. The listener is going to understand that it's more than one. In terms of syntax or word order, I might say something like, the dogs are smiling, or los perros están sonriendo. When I look at that, those are similar order in both my first and second language. I see the, los, dogs, noun, perros, those mean the same thing, are están, and then smiling and sonriendo. So I'm able to follow the same rules in both of my languages to communicate this message. However, if I change one feature of this, it's going to require some other rules to be applied. So in English, I might say, the white dog has black spots. Now, when I have to say this in Spanish, I have to remember Spanish doesn't have the same rule. Here, el perro blanco tiene manchas negras. I have to switch the position of the word that I use before. So in Spanish, I have to use the noun and then the adjective. So if I translate this literally, it says, the dog, white, has spots black. So if I don't pick up, or if I'm not sensitive to those differences in the rule structure on different communications that I have with my communication partners, we might have some miscommunications. And as for content, that means semantics, or the meaning, vocabulary. So you're seeing here, the black dog has brown patches. Same thing in Spanish. I have to learn all of these other different words to refer to the same things. The, el, perro, black, or actually perro, dog, black, negro. So you're seeing these combinations of all of these different layers of form, content, and use that have to be actively engaged and used depending on which situation, conversational partner I have in front of me, and how I have to adapt my language every single time I open my mouth. In terms of use refers to pragmatics, or the social rules of language. And so you might say, your communication partner might say something like, can you please open the door for me? If you respond something like, the white dog has black spots, there might be a problem there, right? They might say, did you not hear me? Do you not want to go open the door for me? One starts thinking about the ramification of, why didn't you open the door for me, and why did you respond this way, right? I'm sure y'all can think about a time that something like this happened, or you observed someone do this. Life. So with bilingual speech-language pathology, when I was on the market just 1.5 years ago, I heard, you're a rare commodity. And in fact, in the American Speech-Language Hearing Association, only 7.2% of practitioners are Hispanic or Latino, so 92% are white, and 8.4% of our practitioners are bilingual. 8.4. Think about what that means when we're talking about these two sets of developing language. I'm letting that marinate. Luckily, we're working on something in high school, so if anybody would like to come out and we're delivering a curriculum to high school students on Desert View High School, and through our partnership with Upward Bound here at the University of Arizona, we've started seeing some high school students at Cholla High School, Pueblo High School, and Santa Rita High School, and we appreciate our partners so much for giving us that door to come in and connect with our students so that they know that they could use their language skills here. And thank you to the University of Arizona Hispanic Serving Initiatives for funding that research. So when we think about the Spanish spoken in the home and those demographics that I just shared with you about my profession, it's alarming to consider the ramifications of inaction. And this is just speaking on the Spanish-speaking community that is so prevalent here in the Southwest, but think about all of the other languages that exist in this country and what that means for practice when they do not have a bilingual speech-language pathologist that speaks their language. So what I have learned through the families and the students that I've worked with all these years, the last 13 years, and all of the wonderful people that have mentored me that I've learned from here at the University of Arizona, but also at the University of New Mexico, and also at the University of Texas at Austin, across a variety of different disciplines, which include special education and educational psychology. We opened up the scope really big there to see what's going on and what is actually a path forward for addressing the needs of our community. And last, all of the wonderful teachers that I've gotten to learn from and how they're teaching all of our students. But as a researcher clinician, I've learned a lot of hard lessons over time. So we know, based on this wonderful research that has come out, that research, as traditionally done, takes about 17 years to be seen in practice. And that's only 14% of the research findings that are adapted in clinical practice. So what I mean by traditional dissemination and research methods is publishing in scientific journals and presenting at scientific conferences. Well, my teachers aren't at the scientific conferences. The speech-language pathologists have caseloads of 60 to 70, maybe some have 80. Are they really reading all of this research that's emerging and take the time to look at that? Oh man, they've already got so much on their plate. As much as we want to push more of this work on it, it's not getting to them early enough. And that is alarming when we think about the communities that are underserved across this country that do not have access to a practitioner that speaks their language. So we don't have time to wait that amount of time. So in my doctoral or postdoctoral training, I started going and doing more implementation science. And that is it's science that bridges the gap between research and clinical practice, because the work that we are producing should be immediately be able to be carried out by our practitioners today. Right? And a lot of the work that I'll be sharing with you from here on will be focused on this implementation science framework that I'm following so that we can start addressing the needs of our community faster. So in practice, I always heard from the parents, the pediatrician told me to stick to English only because he appeared to be having trouble learning both languages. I wanted my child to learn both Spanish and English, but I kept hearing that it could lead to delays. Me dijo la maestra que nomás le hable en inglés para que no se confunda. Or, no quiero que se atrase en la escuela. I don't want him to get behind in school. The teacher told me to only speak English because he's getting confused. Well, my research, I conducted a nationwide survey while I was at UT Austin, thanks to the Provost Early Career Fellows Fund, and I learned that 1 in 3 parents, either bilingual or Spanish monolingual parents, are hearing from somebody in their lives to stop speaking their home language. When I asked them who told you this, the primary folks they're hearing it from are pediatricians or doctors. We're hearing it from family members, and we're hearing it from teachers. So if you are a parent and you are potentially a new parent learning about the things that are going to impact your child, every parent wants what's best for their child, right? If you are a person who is an expert in development, an expert in health, well, I'm going to trust the doctor. I'm going to trust the pediatrician. I'm going to trust the teacher. They know best, right? I want to see them be successful. And these numbers don't add up because many of them said this person, and this person. So the reality is that none of it is true. None of it. One last point there, even strangers are telling parents, you should stop because they're going to get confused. Strangers. I didn't put them up there because they weren't the primary number, but they were about between 10 to 20%. Strangers care a lot about what parents are teaching their children. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. Bilinguals know just as many words or more than monolingually developing children. So here's a wonderful example that highlights how languages might show up in development.
Okay, tell me in English, what color are your shoes? That's right, good job, Mama. Y en español, ¿qué color?
Rosa.
Yes. Okay, sit down, sit down. ¿Y qué color son tus pijamas? Black, that's right. Pero en español, ¿qué color es black en español?
Black is color.
You're so silly.
So cute, right there. She was like, I don't know what it is. I'm gonna be silly instead, but you get it, right, Mom? So wonderful to see. So for these concepts that I'm showing you here, we see pink, rosa, and black. That's 3 different words this child knows, compared to a monolingual that would have pink and black, too. This is in early development. But if we're only valuing monolingual performance like the school systems often do, English only, or test in English only, we're only seeing one side of the picture in a person's development, and we're only seeing one side or one half of their skills, their abilities, their ideas, their abilities to form connections with others. Next, there is also a distribution of skills across languages. So, not everything that I learn in English is not something that I know in Spanish. There are many things I can't communicate in Spanish. If you put me in front of a IEP meeting at the school and tell me to translate information by the physical therapist, I do not know any of that terminology in Spanish, even though I've been using the language my whole life. Here's another wonderful example in early development.
1, 2, 3,
1, 2, 3,
4,
5,
6,
7,
8,
8, 7, 8,
9,
9,
10.
10.
Wow! Isn't that amazing? She says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were correct. They were counting and understanding those concepts and principles, but their other language bled through, right? This is a cross-linguistic influence. The other language is coming in and substituting what's there, but that doesn't make it wrong. Which oftentimes when we're looking in educational systems, they are only looking at the correct form in the English-only production. And bilinguals are not 2 monolinguals in one. So these systems, as much as folks like to think, oh, well, this is English y esto es español. Este es un idioma and this is another language. That's not the reality, because both of these languages are both, or all 3, or all 4, or all 5, all the languages a person knows are always connected. They are always activated. There is no way to turn off one language or another. And you might see features of these cross-linguistic influences come through in the production of language. It might be in phonology, the sounds that one produces. It might be in the ways that I'm combining words. It might be in the ways that I'm organizing my sentences that I just showed you earlier. I need to know when to apply those rules for it to make sense to the speaker that's right in front of me. And the reality is that the majority of the world speaks more than one language. In fact, estimates range from 50 to 60% of the world is bilingual or multilingual. This is the reality. And as I've gone through and have been in practice for the last 13 years as a speech-language pathologist, I continue to practice clinically, now with adults with very difficult circumstances. I've learned and followed this quote that is older than me. The bilingual's communicative competence cannot be evaluated correctly through only one language. It must be studied instead through the bilingual's total language repertoire as it is used in his or her everyday life. So if we think about a lot of the testing processes that we use in the schools, most of those things are unnatural. They're not quite normal. It's a, what? What do you want me to do? You're the adult. You should know what the answer is, right? Okay, so what can everyday look like? Everyday life look like? Thanks to the Confluence Center for Creative Inquiry for funding this wonderful work that has so drastically changed my research path and trajectory and identity as a scholar. I've been doing this work for the last year in collecting people's bilingual stories. And I've so far been able to interview 111 participants between 18 and 92 years of age, mostly women at this point, but I continue and intend to collect a lot more data on this work, all the way from Tijuana, San Diego area, all the way into McAllen and Brownsville, Texas. And these are all the experiences of many other people like me that these experiences are not unique. These are millions of people that are experiencing this across the country. While I am focusing primarily on the US-Mexico borderlands, these experiences also translate to bilingual communities in the United States, like Boyle Heights in LA. So let's take a look at what everyday life can look like.
Did you have difficulty understanding your book?
Yeah,
Like your mom?
little. Es que sí tuve dificultades pues entendiendo el libro, pues.
Oh, el libro de ciencias.
Le dije que sí.
¿En qué yo lo puedo ayudar a usted? Porque parece que ahí no va bien su punteo. Está un poquito bajito, entonces, ¿qué es lo que puede hacer para que mejore su calificación?
Well, my mom wants to know how can I get better in spelling, like what she can help me.
No, just make sure that he's reading 30 minutes every day.
Igual usted me puede ayudar en lectura, decirme que yo lea 30 minutos todos los días y eso me va a ayudar mucho.
Isn't that amazing that a child this age can do that? They're doing it every day. But I've heard multiple times in the last 6-7 years by experts in my field that this is not language. Letting that marinate and what that means. You saw the demographics. When we don't have a representation in science, we also don't have representation in the practices in communities that are different from our own. So these situations in which students, family members, people that are still doing this today, even in their older life, they're doing it in school, work, stores, phone calls, TV, mail, doctors, church, bills, and taxes. I learned earlier this week, people are doing it in the jails. This never ends. And for a lot of family members, I've heard also, oh, you know, I'm gonna wait till my daughter comes and visits me after she has her spring break or when she comes for a break to schedule the appointment so I can go to the doctor so that she can translate for me. These are college students. Consider the unnecessary burden that is placed across the lifespan for people still having to do this. And this is all because we have systemic inequities in language access in our communities where English is the dominant language and we don't consider the other languages in the community. Up until 2 weeks ago, English, there was no official language in this country. 249 years, no official language. One would think that there was an official language based on the practices and the needs and being in an English-dominant world. But the reality is that people have not been accounting for the needs of community members, and we're seeing that directly translate into practice, into the needs to healthcare outcomes. What if you're delaying 3 months till your daughter comes and visit, right? That's 3 months that you're waiting to get a diagnosis, to get your medication. All of the ramifications here, that's not touching on the school system. So here's a little bit more on how frequently would you have to language broker?
All the time. I mean, think of any time you as an adult have a matter that you need to address, doctor's appointments, repair shops, bills coming in, letters. It was almost like an everyday thing in order to exist here, you know, in the United States. It happened all the time. You don't realize it, obviously, but looking back, I'm like, there wasn't a day that we didn't have to do that.
In order to exist here, let's think about all of the unnecessary barriers that we're creating when we don't account for language. We're talking about access and communication, but if we're not considering how we are how we're not providing the access to the person's language, what are we doing? Right? So language brokering is an everyday practice for bilingual communities. It requires this familial and community support of bonds, the needs, the access to resources. We know about social determinants of health. Language and literacy, health literacy are big components of that. If you don't have that access, healthcare, this can also be directly tied to healthcare disparities. It closes these institutional gaps in the community, and it challenges power dynamics because children are serving the need to fill the language needs of the family. Cultural preservation. So while this is still a difficult task for young children, it's also a way for them to use their skill sets to protect their language, to protect their family bonds, right? And it's also a sign of unity and struggle in minoritized communities in this country. It supports the identity development of children because they're recognizing some of these systemic inequities very early on, but it's also highlighting a community's persistence and their cultural linguistic wealth to still make themselves able to function here, to survive here. So another question, I have so many questions that I wish I could share with y'all, but these are some of the big ones. How do you feel your languages contribute to your personal identity? I feel like it makes me who I am. So oftentimes, people say, well, I don't speak the language anymore. I don't feel like I've earned the right to be called Mexican American or Latina. I don't do that. I'm a no sabo. I'm a pocho. I've been told too many times that my language is not good or that it sounds funny, or I've been criticized by the way I say things, or, there's so much language anxiety that manifests. And along with society telling families, stop speaking that language. You're going to be delayed. You're going to be confused. They're going to be disordered. Life is going to be more difficult for them if you continue that language. If parents follow through with those suggestions, students, upon getting older, are going to struggle with understanding a part of themselves in their identity, but also a part of themselves in their culture. Losing a language is losing an identity or a piece of your identity, but it's also losing a part of your culture. We'd like to support bilingual development in our community. Anybody can start learning a second language. We have resources all around us, and it's critically important now that there is an official language to protect the things that we want to see more of. And that includes creating supportive learning environments at home, at school, and in community activities all around us. Having that curiosity. When you hear differences in speech production, in the language production that people around you are communicating, you can approach it with a curiosity and say, wow, think about all of the things that this person is coordinating in their mind. I wonder what influence that is. I wonder what language features those are, right? Different is not bad. Variety, as they say, is the spice of life, right? We want variety. Variety is wonderful. We want to create judgment-free zones. When students are told that's wrong, that's disordered, that sounds bad, you think they're going to want to keep hearing that? No, nobody wants to be told that's bad, that doesn't sound right. And that is a lot for me to think about as a speech-language pathologist. And all of the things that our students are already inherently coming with if they have an underlying brain-based difficulty with learning, and their bilingualism is blamed for the way their brains are different. Skills are distributed across languages. Skills will not be the same across both languages. As much as we like to say, hey, can you translate this for me? I don't learn everything that I learn in my academic setting in Spanish. There are different needs and different uses for my languages, and this applies to all languages and all speakers of other languages. Bilingualism is a superpower, and we can all promote this, and we can all be our own heroes in this story. So thank you all for being here today and listening, and yeah.
Just want to thank Genesis again. Genesis, it was fascinating to hear how the brain processes multiple languages and how it impacts our community. And I'm going to invite Genesis up here after we take a look at the next little bit of show to answer any of your questions. So if you have questions, please come up and engage with Genesis. She'll hang out for a little while. But for now, I'd like to invite you all to next Thursday's lecture, which is featuring Dr. Ellen Rylaw from the Department of Computer Science. Ellen is going to share a little more about her talk for next week in this short video.
Hello, my name is Ellen Rylaw, and I hope you will join us at Centennial Hall on Thursday night for the next lecture in the 2025 College of Science Lecture Series. In my talk, I will discuss my research on recognizing emotions in human-computer communication. I will explain why recognizing emotions is important for human language processing and why it remains challenging for computational models. I hope to see you there.
All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you get home safely, but please do come on up and ask Genesis questions if you have them. Thanks.